by saying congratulations on this film. I think all of us that went to the premiere the other night here in Melbourne were absolutely blown away by the film. So congratulations.
Oh, thank you. It's a total team effort. You know, we have an Australian director and we have great actors and a great screenwriter. So it's always nice when it comes together.
So tell me a little bit about what your first thoughts were when you read the script for this film, because it's one of those films where as an audience you sit there wondering what is going to happen next, who is the guilty party. What was that like for you when you first read the screenplay?
Well, I think a whodunit story is always just super fun. I'm a huge fan of Clue, and it's always fun to kind of guess who did it. And of course, it's always the least likely person. And I love red herrings, which it had plenty of. So I really liked that it was an American Western from a totally fresh point of view. I thought it was really cool to have really strong female characters driving the story and being the catalyst and impetus for the narrative, but also having really diverse characters. You know, you have I can't remember if I've ever seen a gay couple in a Western, or, you know, or like a Mexican businesswoman in a Western, or, you know, I mean, our lead is Isaiah, you know, so I really feel like it was so different and fresh, but also historical, and it had everything that I think we love about a Western, you know, gunfights and horse chases and the quick draw, right? Like who's gonna draw first, and the suspense of a good mystery of who done it. But it also had these different characters that we had never ever seen before in like 50 years of American Westerns.
Were you a big fan of Westerns when you were growing up? Because I know for here in Australia, for most of us that are my age, like I'm in my 40s, Westerns were kind of the first films we ever got to watch, because our dads would watch them on a Sunday night or a Saturday night on television. Were you much of a Westerns fan?
Oh, that's so funny. I never thought of that. Yeah, I mean, look, I love me, you know, Tombstone and True Grit and, you know, Magnificent Seven. Like that's all so fun. I love horses, so I just love, you know, seeing them just galloping and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, I liked my fair share of Westerns for the same reason. You know, my dad loved them, so you kind of just watch he also loved Star Trek, so I did grow up watching a lot of Star Trek. But yeah, I just kind of watched them because he did, and then you know, I like my Westerns here and there, but I wasn't like, oh my God, Westerns are like my favorite thing ever. But yeah, after this movie, I was like, gosh, maybe they are. Like, it's really fun to be in one and kind of just see characters that you never had as a kid, you know?
Does it feel different on set as well, of course, because I know with the Yellowstone Film Ranch that they built, you were basically there in Yellowstone City. Does that make it feel different, say, to when you're working on Lucifer and you're using a studio set?
Absolutely. I think in this case, Montana became its own character. And what's so cool about this movie is that it had never been shot before in a movie. So it was the first time you've ever seen this particular church, and the first time you've ever seen the stable, and the first time we've ever seen the saloon. And I think it really gave its authenticity because the wind was real. You know, people were rolling their ankles left and right during fight scenes and action scenes because it was uneven. It wasn't like you said, you're shooting on like a studio lot and everything's like perfectly paved. I mean, it was precarious. Like, we were out there in the middle of nowhere. There's horses running wild. There's wild animals. There's snakes. You know, there's just, I mean, it was cold. It was windy. It was hot. You know, it was just very extreme weather, but like you wouldn't have it any other way because that's how it was for them in 1890. So I think it actually makes the acting easier because we were wearing actual vintage clothing and we were wearing hair clips that could fall apart if you weren't gentle with them, and actual boots that like didn't fit because people were of different sizes back then, and in a corset where I'm like, how am I going to have lunch with this corset? It's you really feel like you have to have good posture because you're wearing the actual clothes that they wore back in the day, and you're outside in the middle of this beautiful country like land, of Montana, in the middle of nowhere. So I absolutely think that really added to the authenticity. I mean, things were falling over. Like you couldn't have something like next to you, otherwise it would float away.
Yeah.
So we really were out there in the middle of nowhere, and you could hear the coyotes at night howling, probably some wolves. I mean it's it's out there, and I think for a Western, you wouldn't want to have it any other way.
Yeah, and you were filming during COVID as well. Did that mean that you actually stayed on the ranch for longer than what you would normally do because of the COVID restrictions?
Yeah, we definitely had to come out early in quarantine, and I think it really kind of bonded us because, you kind of, I think most people didn't go out because they didn't want to get sick. So you kind of stayed in with the people that you knew were getting tested for COVID like 8 times a week. And you're like, okay, we could go grab a sandwich because you get tested just as much as I do.
Yeah.
So I think it bonds you with your cast.
So, Aimee, tell us a little bit about your character, Isabel. She's such an interesting character. Like you said, she's a businesswoman. She's a sex worker. She has motherly instincts for the young girl in the film, and she's in love with a married man. Tell us a little bit about the character and what stood out to you the most when you first read the character.
Well, Isabel Santos, which actually wasn't even explored in the movie, but was in the original pitch that they had to me, was the daughter of a Mexican general. And so she's actually quite proficient with a weapon, which we do get a glimpse of. So I like that she was self-possessed. I like that she was independent. I like that she was the boss. I liked that she was in charge of the money. I thought it was very important to see her with the ledger, which I love that Eric wrote. So we see her, calculating finances for the business to make sure that, they don't go over budget. And I just love that she was bilingual. The Richie, who, as you know, is Australian, and Eric, the writer, I asked them if she could sing. I said, look, I think back in the day, obviously there was no streaming services, so their form of entertainment was, gathering around the fire and telling stories, but also singing and dancing and playing piano. So would she be able to sing? And they were so open to the idea, and she and so I got to sing in the film, and it's this beautiful ballad from back in the day called La Llorona, which means the weeping woman, which is just played perfectly because she's in love with this man. And so I just love that she wasn't, I love that she wasn't someone's girl toy. She wasn't like she was her own woman. She slept with who she wanted. She fell in love with who she wanted, and she ran the business like she wanted. And I personally can't remember a Western where we've seen that kind of Mexican character. So I always really like to do things that haven't been done, and I think it's really important to use media to kind of shed light on your community. So yeah. I just loved so many things about her, and I love that she was all about education for the kids. I mean, she was adamant about building a school and making sure that they did their Bible studies, and I just love that she really promoted education. So I was 100% on board as soon as they pitched it to me.
I remember that when you were here in Melbourne, you mentioned that you were excited about this film role that we would see you in soon where you got to sing, and you mentioned also that one of your favourite moments on Lucifer was when you got to sing as well. Is music a real passion of yours outside of acting?
I think it is. I remember my Puerto Rican grandfather just always playing music, and always, playing music either live or listening to it and blasting it in his house, and it was just very important. Like dancing and singing, it was just part of how I grew up, and so yes, I loved singing on Lucifer. I was terrified / loved it. And then I got to sing here, which was really cool because I got to sing in Spanish. And then I have a movie coming out on Netflix in a few months where I do all my own singing because I play like a superstar. I play like a Shakira, J-Lo type, and that was it was very fun and very terrifying, but I think I do. Sometimes I feel like singing expresses love better than speech, and I think it's one of my love languages. So sometimes I'll sing to people when I don't know what else to say, because I just think that music is totally universal. Like, you may not understand what I'm saying, but you'll understand what I'm trying to communicate to you. So yeah, I think singing, I don't want to become a professional singer. Let's not get it twisted. But yeah, I definitely enjoy it as a part of my artistic expression.
Definitely. You mentioned before how torturous the corsets were that you had to wear, but how much of Isabel's wardrobe put you into character as well? Because she had a pretty amazing wardrobe.
Yeah, all of those the wardrobe department did an incredible job. They're all, I think, that, like the sketches, it was like a little museum of the fabrics. I mean, it was very authentic to the time. And yes, the corsets definitely made you stand up properly and have good posture. I don't really have great posture, but for some reason, once you put on that corset, you really don't have a choice. And when I watched the movie, I thought, gosh, she has such good posture. That's so good. But women back then, were trained to have good posture, and the corset would reinforce that. So, 100%, the boots. There was a specific tool needed in order to put my boots on. I could not put my boots on my own because there were so many buttons.
Yep.
And so you needed to use a specific tool to even put your boots on. So then you really appreciate how long it took for a woman to do anything. Just getting dressed in the morning was like a whole operation. So it definitely helped. I think a very little acting, I think, necessary between Montana and the incredible sets and the wardrobe.
Definitely. So, Aimee, I know we are running out of time very, very quickly, so I'll just finish with one last question. Everybody here in Australia is very excited about the fact that this film is coming from an Australian director. What's Richard like to work with as a director?
He is so great. I think he is so collaborative and so open and so I think when you're the captain of a ship, it's very easy to be a control freak, and he had this beautiful balance of having absolute command of the set. He had absolute respect from every single person on the set, and he could make it quiet when it needed to be quiet, and he had everyone's attention when he needed everyone's attention. But he was also so open to hearing actors' ideas and pitches, and I really have to give him full credit for just assembling this team and allowing the team to do their thing, but also it all being in his vision. He is so prepared. He knows exactly what he wants. Every single one of his frames was like a painting. He really cares. Like, I always say, you can pay someone to do a job, but you can't pay someone to put their blood, sweat, tears, heart, and passion in overdrive. And that's what he did. Like, his whole family was there. He was just 100% in, which is so contagious. Like, he was our leader, he was our captain, and obviously, as you know, as an Australian, a great sense of humor.
Yeah.
So even though it was 3 in the morning, or even though it was 17-hour days, or even though it was freezing, or even though like it was drenching, torrential rain, he always had a smile on his face. He's always cracking jokes, and it just makes the days go quicker. So I would love to work with him again. I keep texting him. I'm like, hey, when are we going to work together again? What are you doing next? Because I would just love to be in all his movies, even if I just pop in and out. So I would love to work with him again, and it was just a wonderful experience that I hope is the first of many.
Definitely. Well,